The United States is currently engaged in a de facto war with Iran, seemingly rooted in Iran's pursuit of nuclear capabilities. Now, I want to take a step back and talk about the legal and historical consequence of this moment. And I believe in order to understand why this moment is testing the post World War II legal order, we have to first go back and see how that order was first built. In 1945, after the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the international community confronted a reality it never faced before. For the first time, humanity now possessed the ability to annihilate itself. Now, the response wasn't only a moral one, but a legal one. States created the United Nations and adopted the United Nations Charter, which prohibited the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of another state, save for narrow circumstances like self-defense. The idea was to move away from a world where military force was the only means of survival. 2 decades later, that project expanded with the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Now, under that treaty, non-nuclear states agreed not to pursue nuclear weapons, and nuclear-armed states committed to eventual disarmament and facilitating peaceful nuclear energy under international supervision. The premise was simple. Global stability would be strengthened by limiting the spread of nuclear arms, not encouraging it. This was the structure on which the modern international order was built on. Now, after 1945, but before this treaty was formed, nuclear weapons became central to how major powers thought about survival. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union built arsenals capable of mutual destruction, each understanding that initiating indirect war would invite catastrophic retaliation. And that understanding shaped restraint at the highest levels of government. We saw that at display during the Cuban Missile Crisis. For those 13 days, the world literally stood on the edge of nuclear war. Now, that crisis was averted because both governments understood and recognized the scale of destruction that escalation would have triggered. From that point on, nuclear capabilities shaped how nuclear powers dealt with one another. Direct war between them carried consequences neither side was willing to test. And that reality didn't go away after the Cold War ended. It continued to influence how force was considered at the highest level of state decision-making, both for nuclear powers and non-nuclear states. That Cold War experience established a clear fact. Nuclear capability affects how force is used between major powers. Now take a look at what has happened in the decades since. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. Iraq didn't possess nuclear weapons. In 2011, NATO intervened in Libya after Gaddafi had halted his nuclear program. In the past year alone, the United States has engaged in military attacks against Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Nigeria, and Venezuela. None of these states holding nuclear arsenal. The lesson that this teaches the rest of the world is a very unfortunate but very straightforward one. States that do not possess nuclear weapons remain exposed to potential military aggression and intervention. The international system does have rules. The United Nations Charter restricts the use of force. The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons seeks to contain the spread of nuclear arms. Entire institutions exist to monitor compliance and investigate violations. But treaties do not enforce themselves. They depend on states, especially powerful states, to treat them as binding, even when doing so requires restraint. International law isn't magic. It doesn't override military capability, and it doesn't override strategic calculation. Its strength comes from consistent behavior. But when that behavior is signaling that nuclear capability is what insulates a state from force, that carries more weight than the text of any treaty ever could. And that tension is sitting at the center of this moment. The post-World War II legal order was built on the belief that security could exist without universal nuclear armament. And that belief always required restraint from powerful states and trust from smaller ones. But when the lesson being absorbed is nuclear capability is what insulates a state from use of force, that belief begins to weaken. And once that shift takes place, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to reverse it. and the world becomes a much more dangerous place.